Phil Dobson here, author of The Brain Book and founder of Brain Workshops. In this video, I want to help you with your goals. Now, I don't know what your current relationship is with goals, but it's January, right? So have you spent any time this year thinking about it, thinking about designing the next 12 months or even beyond that? Because in my experience, a lot of people understand, they acknowledge the importance of setting goals, but they don't tend to do it very well. I mean, even last week I was with a group of just business owners and chief execs, and when going around the room, most people had, to be honest, not really done it properly. Some of them had got a sense of their goals, but they hadn't really broken it into processes perhaps. Others perhaps had clarity on their business goals, but they hadn't really paid enough attention to their personal goals, their personal life. So I think that it's important to acknowledge, especially at the beginning of the year, how important it is to get a bit of clarity on where you want the year to go. And goal setting, I think, is important not just around the achievement of things. There's something bigger than that. And it's about increasing your sense of agency over your life, right? If you think about the benefits of setting goals, well, number one, it does probably make your ideal or desired future more likely, but it also builds your sense of agency, your sense of self-directedness, right? Humans are teleological, as in we like to feel we are contributing to something. We like feeling this sense of purpose, of meaning, also accomplishment. So it's also about affecting your well-being. Now, think about the alternative. The alternative to setting goals is not setting goals, in which case also the risk is we just spend our life reacting to stuff. I don't know if it's something you can relate to, but a lot of the people I work with, the businesses I work with, especially when we talk about working smarter, we all seem to be really busy. And the busier we are, the harder we find it to prioritize, the harder we find it to switch off, the harder we find it to focus. And it's very hard to prioritize if you haven't begun by setting your goals. It's really about becoming more outcome-oriented rather than just task-oriented. If we're just task-oriented, we just work harder, becoming ever busier. So really think, this video I want to introduce you to some goal-setting techniques, not just around setting goals, but designing your life, right? Reclaiming your values and living more in accordance with your values. Now, this is something that I've kind of figured out over many years. About 10 years ago, I set up my business and I spent a whole day thinking about this stuff, thinking about my goals for the year. Now, 10 years later, I spend about a week doing it. Only because each offsite that I did, I wished I had more time. And it's funny, that piece around an offsite, this observation that individuals all too often don't set goals, or they don't do it very well, or maybe they've decided it's not that important. But if I ask them, if you had your own business, would you spend some time doing a strategy offsite? The answer is always yes. Which is an interesting observation, isn't it? The fact that if we had a business, we'd set goals, but we don't spend that same time on our life. And surely a business can never be more important than your life. So, in this video, it may be slightly longer than normal, so maybe get a pen and paper and feel free to pause it as we go through. I'm just going to introduce the things that I think are worth considering. I'm not going to tell you how long to spend on them, because that's up to you, but I think there are certain things. Goal setting is about doing lots of different things well, I think, and it's not just about getting clarity on your year goals and getting some sort of specificity on them. SMART goals are important, but I think there's more to it than that. So I'm going to give you a sequence to go through. Pen and paper at the ready. Right. How do you set goals? And in particular, how do you set goals at the beginning of the year, or maybe even the beginning of a decade? Step number one, I think, identify your values. This is something that I've only really recently acknowledged the importance of beginning with. i.e., there's no point dedicating the next year, 3 or 10 years of your life in the pursuit of something that you don't really care enough about. Right? Wouldn't it be a shame if you spent the next 5 years devoting yourself to earning lots of money, if actually your core values are more around relationships, creativity, your health? And if you sacrifice those things, there's no point in achieving the goals you've set, because they're not really, it's not your definition of success. So start with your values. Spend a few moments, if you haven't done so already, if you don't have clarity on your top 5, maybe 10 values, think about that first. What is it important to you? Because all too often I notice, again, this curse of busyness, that our days, weeks, months, and even years aren't congruent with our values. We're spending too much time dedicating our energy and our attention to the pursuit of things that we don't really care about. So, number one, identify your values. That will then feed the rest of this goal setting conversation. Then, create your long-term vision or your long-term goals. That's step 2. What do I mean by long-term? Well, I'm leaving it deliberately up to you. For some people it's 3 years, some people it's 5, some people it's 10. I don't even think you need necessarily at this point to be specific on the deadline. But what is important is you think big, that you're ambitious, and you engage in it emotionally. Again, the problem with SMART goals set too soon is they're not particularly emotionally engaging, are they? You might know exactly what you need to do to get there. You might need to know what needs to happen to tick it off. But do you care about it? You know, I think all too often, all of us, myself included, sometimes we suffer with things like lack of discipline, lack of motivation. We procrastinate, right? Well, part of the solution to that is re-engaging in why this is important to you. Now again, if you've identified your values and you're counting back from that, that will probably help. But if you create a long-term vision that you find compelling, you find it uplifting, right? Because you dream a little, well, everything's suddenly a bit easier. Things like discipline and motivation become your ally. They're more natural, aren't they? So again, spend a few minutes or a few hours if you can, designing your ideal future. And don't just think about work, think about your learning goals. What have you learned? What skills have you developed? Who have you become? What have you created? What have you explored? Think about your health, your fitness, if that's important to you. Again, back to your values. If you've identified your values, thinking 10 years down the line or thereabouts, what would define success? Have fun with it. Be ambitious. Think big. Allow yourself to dream for just a little. Right, that's the next step. Again, I'd probably encourage you now to pause this video as you have a bit of fun designing your vision, your long-term success. Right, now the next step is to get clarity on your year goals, right? In the next 12 months, what are your priorities? Now, the mistake here that people make often is to just try and achieve too much. You can't make progress on all the things in your long-term vision straight away. You can try, but you're setting yourself up for failure. And again, repeating this internal narrative that you haven't got the discipline necessary to achieve your goals. No, you just need to be more selective. So now, when you decide on your next year, December the 31st, I would encourage you to pick 3 to 5 priorities. 3 will be better than 5, but definitely no more than 5. And again, as you select these, notice the proportion of work goals to personal goals. Once again, it's no good having values and a long-term vision that is all around personal goals, and yet the next 12 months is perpetually populated only by work and business goals, right? You're constantly living out of balance, something that, again, that I notice happens all too often. So again, spend a few moments now identifying what are your priorities for this year, your 3 to 5 key priorities, and what progress will you have made on each by the end of the year. Try to be now specific if you can. Right, now year goals is something that I'm sure is familiar to you. Maybe you already had a sense of clarity on your objectives by the end of December. What people tend not to do, and again something that I've only recently done, I suppose the last 3 or 4 years, is to then get clarity on your quarter goals. It seems so obvious when you think about it logically to break 12-month goals into the next 3 months, but again, it's something that isn't done very often in my experience. And there's something I think important to acknowledge here, that the busier we get, etc., we tend to notice busy days and busy weeks, and we spend our life, you know, moving tasks from Tuesday to Wednesday as we haven't yet completed it. And so ultimately, I think there's something to be said in this observation that we tend to overestimate what we can get done in 3 weeks, right? But we also, I think, tend to underestimate what we can get done in 3 months if we have the clarity on what would define success in 3 months' time. And if we're ruthless with our prioritization and we select no more than 3 key projects, absolute priorities for the next 3 months. So when you're working on a year, I'll permit you 5, but now when you're working on the next 3 months or the next 13 weeks, what are your 3 priorities? You need to be specific, you need to be able to measure it if you can, some sort of metric. How specifically will you know you've made the progress you want to by the end of, let's say, March the 31st? Okay, so that hopefully has helped you get clarity on your chronological goals, right? You've thought about your values, and that presumably, hopefully, has guided the rest of this process. You've got clarity, or some degree of clarity, on your long-term vision. You've allowed yourself to dream a bit, to imagine what would define success, thinking not just about work, but also about life, how you're spending your time. Then you've got clarity on your year goals, when you're allowed maybe 5 things to work on, but no more. And then your next quarter, you've got clarity on your 3 projects going forward. Now that, I think, has put you in a better position than the same you having not done that, right? Because you now know what will define success from your perspective in the next 3 months. But now I would encourage an entirely different way to look at your goals, and in particular your life. Because again, all too often, we spend our lives, I think, not so much incongruent with our values, but maybe you can relate to this. Do you think that some of last year you didn't spend enough time doing the things that you loved doing? Right? Because we're busy, we've got lots on, workload is relentless sometimes, and if we're not really careful, as the days and the weeks and the months go by, we notice that we're not spending as much time as we might like with the people we love. Maybe there are hobbies. I love writing music, and if I'm not careful, I don't spend quite enough time producing, writing music. What about your health, right? Is exercise a big part of your life, but maybe the last few weeks you haven't done it quite enough? It happens all the time. So now what I would encourage you to do is to think less about goals, but now about lifestyle. Even if you achieve your goals, if your lifestyle isn't what you want, again, is that success? Probably not. So again, go back to your values. You can, if you want now, to do a brainstorm, thinking back to maybe last year or the last quarter. What would you like to do more of? Just start, stop, more, less can help. What are the things you want to start doing that you're not already doing? What are the things you want to do more of? What are the things you want to stop doing? What are the things you want to do less of? Again, not just work, but personal life as well. And once you've done that, now you can start to design your ideal lifestyle, thinking not top down, but bottom up. So the next exercise I might encourage you to do is identify what would a great day look like. I don't mean a day off. I mean, as a default, as a standard-ish day, what would a really great one likely include for you, right? I don't know, some examples. Do you want to be checking your phone first thing before you get out of bed? How many times do you want to check your phone each day throughout the course of an average day? What's your relationship with email and how many times you've opened your email inbox? Does your work day finish at 5, 6, or are you still working at 8 or 9 o'clock? And are you cool with that? Is that something you've designed? Are you still on your phone in the last 60 minutes before you go back to bed? What about exercise, fitness? What does your lunch break look like on a normal day? How do you spend your mornings? What's your morning routine? You don't have to be routine, but have you thought about these sort of things? And have you started to make small changes to make more likely that your days become more in accordance with what you would like them to look like and to feel like? This is about designing your experience, isn't it? Your ongoing experience, your subjective experience, but one that you can, again, influence just like your future, right? You're becoming, again, you're creating and demonstrating greater agency, not just by identifying where you want to be going, and the pursuit of goals is important for sure, but now thinking about what do you want tomorrow to feel like? It's just as important, maybe even more so. So again, what does your perfect day look like? Think about all that stuff I've just mentioned and whatever else is important to you. Okay, once you've done that, what about your week? What does your ideal or perfect week look like? Seeing friends, going on a date, reading, learning. I have no idea what your perfect week looks like, but you probably can get a sense of it, right? Even if it's just acknowledging weeks that don't really work that well for you. Design it. You don't have to calendarize it yet, but just get an idea of your ideal week. Now, this is also important to include work tasks. For example, All too often when I help people work smarter, a lot of that is about prioritization. And I think many of us acknowledge there are high value tasks and activities, such as goal setting, that we don't spend enough time doing, right? So when you think about weeks, there might be activities there, such as, I don't know, coaching your team. If you have a team, then if you notice that you don't spend enough time with one-to-one conversations, helping them become more competent, capable, autonomous, then maybe that's something for your weeks, maybe every Monday. You get the picture, right? Creating a default diary is what we're talking about. So again, pause the video, spend time on your day, but now spend time on your week. And now, you probably guessed this, month. What does your ideal month look like? Now, this is not an exercise in going, right, on the first day of the month this, on the second day of the month this. Of course it isn't. It's identifying there are certain activities, behaviors, tasks even, that probably should happen at least once a month. If you think about business, that could be half a day spent improving systems and processes, improving best practices, right? I mean, if we all spent a bit more time doing that, there'd be less inefficiencies in life. But what about creative goals? Again, me and my writing of music. I need at least one day in the studio every month, or I don't feel as fulfilled, as congruent as I would with that. So what about you? What would your ideal month look like? Are there long weekends? Are there gigs? Are you going to shows, going to the theatre? What else is important to you? Again, going back to your values, right? Design now your ideal month simply by identifying the things that you would love to do every 4 weeks or so. Right, and then the final piece is quarters. Now, I'm not going to ask you to spend too long designing your ideal quarter, but at least acknowledge that now you've got clarity on your quarter goals, you now need to have a quarterly review. And this is where all the process so far starts to sync up. Because if you now look at everything you've done, you've got clarity on your values, like I say, that hopefully has fed all of the other conversations. Then you've got long-term, year, and quarter. Working backwards, you've got clarity on your three goals for the next 3 months. And then working forwards, you've got clarity on what your ideal day, week, and month should look like. And then when you do a quarterly review, this is when you reflect on how you're getting on with all of this stuff. What has gone well? What hasn't gone well? Well, what's been harder than you anticipated? What else have you learned? What, if anything, is missing, right? Missing from your ideal days, weeks, and months. And then going forward, what are you now going to change? What are your next goals for the next quarter? I know we've covered a lot, but there's a lot in that. And the more time you spend doing this stuff, I think the stronger your position. Not just because you're more likely to achieve these things that are important to you, and not just because you're more likely to have days and weeks that you enjoy, right? You bring the joy. But again, you just have this greater sense of ongoing, teleological, autonomous-based agency. You are owning your life. You're influencing it based on the things that are important to you. And if you don't do that, as I said at the beginning of this video, the risk is you only ever respond to things that are sent your way. And I'm all up for embracing opportunity, 100%. And I don't think that it's healthy to obsess around goals, not at all. And I hope that it doesn't come across like this. I just think it's important to think about these things, to consider these things, and to make maybe just small tweaks that make it slightly more likely that 3 months down the line, or 12 months down the line, or 3 years down the line, you can look back and go, I'm glad I made that little tweak or that little decision, because look where I am, look what I'm doing, look how I'm spending my time and how much I'm enjoying it. So I hope this has been valuable. Now, one thing we haven't done, which is time for another video, is how do you break goals into processes? We've kind of mentioned it briefly here, but there are some more tips and tricks that I'll share on a separate video. For now, have fun with this, get your pen and paper out, fill in all the blanks. If you have found this valuable, please share it with someone you care about, someone you think might value this or find this beneficial. And if you want more tips and tricks, then please do go to the website, brainworkshops.co.uk, and there you'll find lots of free lessons, this sort of stuff, helping you think and work smarter by applying what we know about the brain. Best of luck. Until next time.